St. Kitts and Nevis, especially currently. Today we will be having a discussion on education. We all know that education has been impacted significantly by the COVID-19 pandemic. Schools have had to rebuild for the new normal in which we find ourselves. For a period, schools had gone to virtual learning, and then they went back to in-class learning. And now we are again in another wave, the fourth wave of the COVID virus. Now it's called the Omicron. And as we see, according to the statistics, it is moving very rapidly across St. Kitts and Nevis in terms of infections. But we are here today to discuss the logistical arrangements for the reopening of schools and, of course, in this new environment, COVID-19 environment in which we find ourselves. And I have with me today two officials from the Ministry of Education. On my right, I have Mrs. Lisa Pistana, and Mrs. Pistana is the Deputy Chief Education Officer. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
And on my left, I have none other than the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Mr. William Vincent, I think there's another name, Austin. I like to call all of them William Vincent Austin Hodge. And Mr. Hodge is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education. Welcome, Mr. Hodge.
Thank you so much, Mr. William.
Right, so let's get the ball rolling. School is about to reopen. It is not only about to reopen, but we have concerns. And the concerns is, how do we have in class, in person, lessons, teaching, but in a safe environment? Mr. Hodge, logistics.
We will address that topic, that issue or subtopic, I should say, of course. But there are some preliminaries that Mrs. Pistana and myself would like to share, so I would proceed to do that now. Thank you again, Mr. Moderator, for having us on your widely viewed and listened to program. I am happy to acknowledge my fellow panelist, Mrs. Lisa Pistana, the Deputy Chief Education Officer, who is at present carrying the duties of the Chief Education Officer, Mr. Francil Morris, who is on a well-deserved vacation. I think it's the first time he's on vacation since assuming Deputy Chief more than a year ago. Yes. And he's tuned into this program. Where he's at, he's tuned into the program. I use this opportunity to extend New Year greetings to all, especially those who are part of the education fraternity here in St. Kitts and Nevis. I salute all of our stakeholders, and again, especially our teachers, student, parents, and support staff, all who work in education or for education. As we sail through the uncharted waters of 2022, I encourage you, and I quote, to live like a butterfly, go through the changes, and be something beautiful, unquote. In this edition of Working for You, the Ministry of Education is continuing its awareness campaign in light of the school operations during the pandemic. The Ministry of Education urges the public to pay close attention to official bulletins published by the Education Media Unit, as well as addresses that may be made by the Minister of Education. With the daily increase of active cases of the coronavirus, the matter of school reopening is on everybody's mind. Everybody is asking what's happening, when are you opening, are we really opening on Monday the 10th? Today we are here to address safety, school safety in light of the pandemic. I know your topic says the reopening of school, but for us, our topic is really school safety. That's the message we want to drive home by the end of today's program. Everybody would know that there are printed guidelines for the operation of schools. These guidelines, I have them here in print, but they are available. They can be found on the Ministry of Education website. The Ministry of Education website is www.education.gov.kn. And we encourage persons to go on the website and research for themselves. This information is available to the general public. It's a document that came into being on September for the start of the academic year 2021 to 2022 in September. And I just want to refer to some of the logistical arrangement that we have in this document. In short, term 2 of the current academic year is scheduled to begin on January 10th, Monday, January 10th to Friday, 1st April. I think it's Thursday, the 1st of April, 2022. This is the instructional period. By this we mean that children and teachers are to be engaged in teaching and learning. After the first, which is the last day for students, teachers will be required to meet for a few days. Actually, the period designated is the 4th to the 7th of April, but that will be reviewed, and teachers would be engaged in in bringing the registers up to date, tallying, do the end of term totals, report cards, and all other records that are to be done at the end of the term. On the 8th of April, report cards will be ready for distribution to parents, and school closes for the 2-week Easter break. Some of the things that came into being in September: all public and private early childhood centers, primary and secondary schools will resume in January, I'm sorry. All schools will be guided by the NEOC's COVID-19 protocols, the NEOC's COVID-19 protocols. All public primary and secondary schools will reopen on a full-time basis, except the Bass Day High School and the Washington Archibald High School. This is the information that came to us in September. It might be reviewed, it might remain the same. We're going to get to that shortly. The use of public school buildings for after-school and weekend activities is not permissible without the approval from the Office of the Chief Education Officer. We have 3 instructional models that we have worked with actually during the last term: the on-site, the hybrid, and the remote. On-site means that all students have access to face-to-face instruction in accordance with the COVID-19 protocols. Principals should monitor or will monitor and regulate instructional time. Principals would provide additional professional development opportunities to staff on modifying the curricula for online delivery, the use of MS Teams, and how to communicate with students and parents. The hybrid approach, the hybrid instructional model, means that students safely in school or away from school, a combination. Students have access to face-to-face instruction, but on a shift system. On-site instruction is supplemented using the MS Team platform. So that's the hybrid instructional model. The remote model is saying that students safely learn away from school. All students are engaged in learning, utilizing the MS Team platform and instructional packets. So that's the remote model. So in summary, in short, this is the logistical arrangements that have been in place from September. Now, the Cotton Thomas Comprehensive, our special education school, has been on a shift system, largely because we wanted to reduce the number of students in classroom, and because these students have additional challenges, they have other difficulty, we didn't want to create additional problems for them. Their situation is under review depending on transportation, because we have had to engage outside transportation to have children come in the afternoon and some for the morning shift. So that is under review. Early childhood remains as is. The early childhood sector, which is a key sector in education, remains unchanged, and I'm certain that those persons who have children, parents who have children attending early childhood, they are very familiar with the protocols and the procedures. So that, in a nutshell, is the review, but I have a couple of other things that I need to add before I turn over to my colleague. It has been demonstrated in no uncertain terms that the safety of our students and teachers and all who work in education or for education, the safety is priority. However, each of us has that personal responsibility for our health, especially in light of the COVID. We have to continue to drill the message, to adhere to the message. Wash your hands. Wear your mask. Watch your distance. These are messages that we have actually communicated to students since the start of the 2020 school year. And we want to reiterate them because these are the methods that are going to help to keep us safe. We have to wash our hands. We are in the process, we are about to start the construction of a number of hand washing stations in schools, both in St. Kitts and Nevis. This was funded by UNICEF. We are in the process, and that is going to help. A number of schools already have hand washing stations. Wear your mask. We are asking everybody to wear their mask in and out of school, in classrooms. We are now being encouraged to wear 2 masks in some cases, or we are encouraged not to wear the cloth mask. The surgical mask are the preferred, especially in light of the new variant. And we're asking people to keep their distance, whether it's socially or physically. That's the message that we are pushing. The Omicron variant of the virus, as you mentioned, Lesroy, is traveling rapidly, it's highly contagious, and we are learning from other countries that children and young people seem to be the ones who are catching this variant very quickly. As a result, young people and children are being hospitalized because of the virus. Our children are not exempt from this. Before this program is finished, I should be able to provide you with the numbers as to how many school-age children are currently among the 643 cases active as of yesterday. I'm sure that the number perhaps would continue to trend upward. It is for this reason, given the square footage of our classrooms at the Washington Archibald High School and the Basse High School, and the number of students enrolled in each class there, which typically is either 30 or 34, it is for this reason that these 2 schools will have to continue on the shift system. We had already given clearance to those principals to say that we're going to have you bring all of your students back full-time, but with the situation as it is, we have to say your shift system has to continue. In order to improve school safety during the pandemic, we urge all of our parents and teachers and students, support staff, adults who work in our schools to get vaccinated. Yes, many parents rose to the occasion. They got vaccinated because the message was at the time that you have to get vaccinated to protect your own children and those who are older than 80 because they couldn't have the vaccine for themselves. Now, our children, at least from 12 years up to 17, who are in school, or even out of school, they can take the vaccine for themselves. This is a case where they can take the vaccine for themselves, and we would really love to appeal to our young people. These are our future, our promising, brilliant young people in our schools to come out and get vaccinated. We ask parents to support this process, right? With higher vaccination rate, we would be able to say Basley High School and Washington Archibald High School should be able to bring back their students with higher vaccination rates. So we're hoping that as the count goes up, we can change the situation to say all of your students can come back. This cannot happen with low vaccination rate in the face of spiraling active COVID cases. So at this point, I'm going to stop and let. Well, I'll turn back over to you, Mr. Moderator. Don't let me facilitate your program.
Yeah, Mrs. Pistana, the Permanent Secretary, gave an overview of, some of the things basically to expect. We all know that it has been very challenging. The learning and teaching environment has been challenging. Maybe you could tell us, from your point of view, what have we learned about the impact of the pandemic on education, and how is that guiding the practices with respect to education going forward?
Thank you, Mr. Williams. First, let me wish your viewing and listening audience a happy and prosperous new year, and God's richest blessings to be bestowed upon you and your families. And I want to say a huge thank you for being so willing to facilitate this discussion. It's a very important, it's critical at this juncture within the Federation's history, and we greatly appreciate the time that you've taken to give to education so that we can speak about this very important topic. This year, 2022, we were hoping would shape up would be a little bit better, but we've started off with a bang and we're out the gates running. So it's almost like we're on a track. The case numbers are spiraling, they're increasing rapidly. One of the major things that we would have learned as a ministry is the need to be prepared. Always be prepared, to plan ahead, to ensure that we communicate what it is we hope to do within whether the new year or the upcoming year. We communicate it with enough time so that all of our stakeholders can be on board, and that's critical. Because as you know, we have thousands of students. Students have parents. We also have our teaching staff and our ancillary staff, and we all have to be on the same ship. And we have to make sure that we're speaking with one voice as it pertains to the way forward for our institutions. I'm very happy that Mr. Hodge would have gone into some detail about some of the things that we're hoping to do, that we will continue to do and continue to share. It is critical for us to ensure that our safety protocols, and that's why we talk about school safety, are very much in keeping with what NEOC has advised us to do and what the science has advised us to do. We are ensuring that everything we do is in tandem with the science. And I know sometimes that is a bit of a, yes, the cliche, or even for persons listening in, they have their own ideologies and they're reading, and they're very intelligent and they come with their own concerns, and we really want to listen to our stakeholders and to filter those concerns and find the answers for them. But it's critical for us, one, to plan, to communicate, and to ensure that everybody is also trained, because we have to tool up for the new normal. And I wouldn't even say it's a new normal, but it is our norm now. This is where we're at. So for those persons who maybe were adverse to technology, they have to come on board, because that is the wave of our current future and our trajectory. So we need to make sure that all of our stakeholders, whether our students, our parents, our teachers in particular, are on board with the way in which we're going now. So I would say those are some of the key things that we would have learned thus far.
Right. Mrs. Sistano, one of the things that we know is that with the up and down, the tumult in a COVID-19 environment, and students and teachers having to deal with this uncertainty, this disruption in education and so on, there have been a lot of psychosocial impacts.
Most definitely.
Has the ministry measured the psychosocial impacts? Has the ministry diagnosed them? And how has the ministry addressed them? Because those psychosocial impacts, in and of themselves, affect learning, affect teaching, affect the entire education landscape.
Well, to answer that question in a nutshell, Mr. Williams, it is still very early on, even though we're probably in our second year, to say that we would have all the necessary data as it pertains to the psychosocial effects. What I will say to our listening audience is that our children are greatly impacted. Our teachers are greatly impacted, and you are greatly impacted by this. So make, no misnomer about it. All of us are feeling the effects of COVID-19. In the case of our students are living with parents, and some of them would have lost their jobs. So their income in their families has greatly diminished, and the students feel the burden of that. They carry the weight of their parents, and they come to school with that weight. And for us as educators, we have to find ways to help them traverse this new landscape. One of the things that we have done is try to equip our guidance counselors so that they can adequately provide for the needs of these particular students. And sometimes we think, okay, maybe students from the low income families. That's not the case. All of our students are impacted. But our teachers are also impacted, and I really want our listening audience to be very compassionate towards our teachers, because they're not just there to teach our students like robots, but they themselves have homes, they have families, they have lives, and in some cases, they're down to one income within their family. So they come with a burden as well. So we try as best as we can to channel them whether into Project Outreach or Outreach Center so that they can get some sort of counseling, and we provide counseling for our students on site. One of the things that has happened this year, budget-wise, we have increased the number of guidance counselors so as to ensure that we can bridge that gap. So the emotional gap for our students, we have the necessary personnel on site, especially in our larger schools, to accommodate. So no longer in the primary schools will you have a counselor being shared by some of the large schools that are almost as large as some of our secondary schools, but they will have their own guidance counselor, and they'll be able to take care of the students within that particular institution. And like I said before, we have the necessary training. What I would advise parents to do, though, is to look at your children. Some of them will be what we call quietly crying out for help. And so even though they might not be disruptive, they might not be talking a lot or whatever, they're quiet and into themselves, they still need your assistance. They still need you to talk to them. They still need you to ask them critical questions about how they're feeling. And then when you realize that maybe your child is going into that, some level of depression, or they're becoming unusually introverted, then you seek the necessary help. Communicate with our schools. You will see your kids at home, we will see your kids in school. But we have to bridge that communication gap and make sure that we're constantly talking to each other so that we can build a safety net for our children. So I think these are the critical aspects that we have begun engaging in. And even though we don't have what you call the quantitative data to measure exactly where our students are at and some of the psychosocial issues, we know in terms of the qualitative aspect of it, and we look at our students, and we are, kind of the best judge of the people in front of us. We know how they would have changed from last year, and I could use my own personal story. I've been blessed with 2 children. One is 15, one just made 5. And then coming through the pandemic, I saw my 5-year-old go into sort of like a shell, where in public she just really did not want to interact with others unless she actually knew you, and she would cling on a lot. I give credence to her preschool at the time when she was in preschool, and they really helped move her through that difficult period. Give a little shout out to Key Babies. And she was able to come out of that and, be a little bit more assertive, a little bit more interactive. But let's think about those students who their schools are doing their best. But we as parents also have to recognize it, and even in our frustration, try to help our students and navigate this sort of emotional landscape, because they don't necessarily know or have a term for what is happening. They can feel the change in the emotions around them, but they don't necessarily know how to articulate to their parents what they themselves are feeling. So I would say for us, we have to communicate with each other, we have to be very observant, and when you realize something is wrong, we have to reach out to the necessary persons and personnel to help our children and help us as individuals.
Mrs. Pistana has adequately answered that question. I would like to add, however, that the fifth formers who contracted the virus just before exams in July, August this year, that was one constituency that needed social support from our counselors, because when they realized that they were positive and they couldn't go to school to write the exams, they actually started to panic. They wanted to know what was going to happen to them in the future and so on. And here's where we actually reached out to our principals, asking them to get their counselors to touch base with all of these students who were in quarantine because of the pandemic and could not go to write their exams, to provide that sort of support and to assure them that they have the option to write the exams in January of this year, and the exams have now begun. Some persons have taken advantage of that opportunity, or they can wait until June.
Before for June.
Yes, and I'm very happy that she mentioned that the Ministry of Finance has given us the budgetary support to increase our number of guidance counselors, especially at the primary level where we had, one counselor for 23 schools.
Right, and Mr. Hodge, Mrs. Pistana mentioned about lower income families and how they have been affected by the pandemic, much more so than families with high incomes and well-to-do. And that is raising the issue of equity in education and our schools, and it has been even more pronounced, especially having to go to a virtual online education. What is in place for students to ensure that they have the physical infrastructure to be able to deal with this virtual education? Laptops, internet, and all of that.
Okay, so if we take a quick look back, there were 1,800 total laptops were bought for students in St. Kitts and Nevis. 1,200 down here, 600 in Nevis. Those were distributed to students. That was just a drop in the bucket. In addition to that, we got 400 laptops, 399, 400 laptops for teachers to use. Additionally, both in St. Kitts and Nevis, the Ministry of Education took on the responsibility to pay the cost of internet from the cable and Digicel. I think those are the two carriers at the time. That went on for a period longer than we anticipated. We are still working on securing more devices. There's a CDB-funded project that is taking place. The Ministry of Sustainable Development, Ms. Lavon Queely, is the focal point for that here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And that is to enable countries in the region, including St. Kitts and Nevis, to procure laptops for students' use. So the effort is ongoing. And even within the Ministry of Education, we are trying to identify sources where we can increase the number of devices for students. Yes, we schools, I need to commend the school, the principals and their staff for taking on the initiative of identifying students who needed assistance. And at the very school level, they went out on a limb or out of their way to see how they could provide for some of their students in terms of assisting them with meals, assisting them with other material things, Yes, so the schools really took up some of the slack here, being in contact with parents, and where children did not have a laptop or a computer, they were able to use certain platforms that were accessible on phones, because the majority of the parents seem to have at least a cell phone. And so they were able to tap into Google Classroom, Zoom, and the one that designated for education is the Microsoft.
Teams.
Right. But even before the ministry came up with a decision to use the Microsoft Teams, some teachers had already been using platforms that children were able to access.
Just to add to what Mr. Hodge would have said, you can have a device, but if you don't know how to use it, that's another thing, right? And one of the things we've realized when we talk about the new normal, we definitely had to equip and tool up our teachers to ensure that they could teach in an online forum. So we spent, for our summer 2021 workshop, training them in differentiated instruction in an online classroom. And, persons might say, well, how different is it from face-to-face? It's very different because often you're speaking and you don't have that, physical presence. You can't reach out and touch and work closely with your students as you would in a classroom. So we had to make sure that we could equip them so that they feel adequate in themselves to do so, because that's the other thing. You have to be confident in what you're doing in order to do it well. And I would have to say that, it was successful. We did it both at the primary and the secondary level. For our teachers at Cotton Thomas who teach our differently abled students, they were able to receive training as well, so as to make sure when we talk about equity that we have equal situation within, the classroom. So we want to make sure that our classrooms are inclusive, and it's an inclusive teaching and learning environment. And that is one of the major thrusts for us for 21-22, inclusivity. You might or might as well not be aware, but that we have done away with streaming within our first forms. So we have everybody sitting together with the exception for mathematics and English. And, sometimes we take the old tenants and we drag them along with us, even though the rest of the world has abandoned them. And for us, we began to realize that students who learn differently, not that they're necessarily, we like to say they're not book ready or book knowledge. I don't like that term. They just learn differently. And they gravitate to different things, like maybe more hands-on, or, they're more visual and auditory learners. And so we have to begin to teach in such a way to capture all of those students, especially now where we have periods of time and we might be out of the classroom. We have to ensure that these students come the full length with us and we don't leave any of them behind. And hence why training is one of those areas that we put quite a bit of funding into, whether it's training at the local level or for those persons who are currently training in ESL now, they're training with Arizona University. And we've also had, like I said, the persons at Cotton Thomas, and they were training with another university as well, Leslie University. So we take advantage of every opportunity to make sure that our teachers are well tooled up and equipped to adequately meet the needs of the students in our care. So, just to add to what Mr. Hodge would have said.
Yeah, and I have another piece that I want to add, Mr. Williams. I am all for ensuring that we provide devices, equipment, Wi-Fi and so on for our students. Those things are important. And when they can't be physically in classrooms, we would want them to be engaged virtually. But anyway, all over the world, persons are saying, governments are saying, that nothing is better than the in-person learning. Yeah. So even though we give them, they could have the best devices available to them. If they don't show up for class online, as has been the case all over the world. Here in St. Kitts, we had children who didn't show up for class. In New York, we had children who didn't show up for class online. We are saying that we would want to keep our students in school. We are very fortunate here that we were able to have face-to-face instruction. we were hearing that most schools in Jamaica just opened up.
Yes.
For the whole of the first term, they were closed. And so that is what we want to build on, and that is why we are encouraging our parents to get their youngsters vaccinated so that we could bring them face to face in a much safer environment. It's not going to be 100% safe, but once they are vaccinated, it's going to help. All right, and so I just wanted to add that. When schools were opening this Monday in New York, the teachers' union in New York were claiming, or they were making a case to have virtual learning, teaching. And the mayor, the new mayor who just took office, Eric Adams, he said, no, we're doing in-person learning.
Yeah, yes, and that comes with its challenges.
Yes.
I know that you mentioned earlier PS in terms of the following of the non-pharmaceutical measures. We know what those are. The social distancing, the sanitization of hands and classrooms, and of course the wearing of the mask, a mask that is suitable for the prevention of the contracting the virus and transmitting it. And vaccination for our 12 to 17-year-olds. It seems to me that this is going very slow. I don't know what the reasons are for this, but one of the things that has been said is that in order for us to open schools safely and to have in-person learning, in-class learning, is that the more of our 12 to 17-year-olds, that's high school,
Yes.
that they get vaccinated, then it is a safer environment for the in-person learning. The report, the vaccination report for yesterday, the 4th of January, said that only 16.5% of 12 to 17-year-olds, the total population, had received at least the first dose. And 14.2% had received the second dose. So they are fully vaccinated. So there's still a way to go. How is the Ministry of Education addressing this? What is happening to the parents? Are they not on board in terms of the vaccination drive for their children? What is happening?
I'm going to let Ms. Christina start out. She has been with this from the beginning.
I don't know if I should thank you, Mr. Hodge. Well, we've partnered with the Ministry of Health. This is a health situation. Okay, so it's not just education alone. This is a health situation. So we have gone the extra mile to partner with the Ministry of Health. When the Pfizer vaccine was first made available, we actually sent out information to our parents for them to fill out the form so that they can make appointments to go in and get their children vaccinated. They no longer need an appointment. So we've gone the extra step, and we're asking them if it is because some persons, because of where they're employed, they cannot leave their work during the 8 to 4 hour to take their children to be vaccinated. We're saying to them, if it is you'd like a representative from the school to take your child to be vaccinated, then we can do so, but you have to sign a consent form, and all of the necessary information has been sent home to the parents. So we have facilitated that. We have gone the extra mile with PTAs, so we try to inform our parents through dialogue with Ministry of Health personnel so that they can ask, whatever questions they might have, whatever concerns, so that they can move towards getting their children vaccinated. We have discussions with our children at the school level. I think ultimately the coronavirus has presented itself. It's splashed onto the scene like a superstar and it's taken over everything. But people are still concerned about the vaccine itself. I think that's the major concern that we're hearing from our parents. Then some parents say to us, well, you told us, the adults, to get vaccinated so that we can protect our children. Why are you now asking me to vaccinate my child? I think ultimately it is the children who will have to say to their parents, this is what I want. I want to be vaccinated. And what I would encourage our parents is to have that dialogue with your children, because they themselves are on the front lines. They come into schools with us. It's a lot of them. Our class sizes are not as small as we would like them to be in our high schools, that is. They have to sit next to somebody every day. They have to interact with teachers. They have to interact with you parents. And they have their own ideas because they can read, they're intelligent, they converse with their peers, they converse with persons who are a little bit older than them. And ultimately, I think they can say to their parents, this is the risk that I would like to take. This is for myself, it is for you, and this is what I would like to do. So what I would encourage parents to do is to start the dialogue with their teenagers. I don't think for us we should just sit back as parents and just simply say, this is what I want to do for you, or this is what you have to do. Even if you are pro-vaccine, I still think you need to have a discussion with your child so that they can understand what it is is happening and what the way forward should be. And they have some sort of buy-in into it as well. So I think that's critical. So for us on the education side, we are trying everything that we possibly can, without having to drag anybody there, which I don't think it's the right course of action. I think people should want to go, and we should facilitate it, and that is exactly what we're doing.
Right. Mr. Hodge, there are serious implications if we know that the vaccines are not 100%, but we are told that they prevent severe illness, hospitalization, and death. And the evidence bears that out. However, if the 12 to 17-year-olds are not coming on board and getting the vaccine, it means then that the possibility of more disruptions in schools,
yes,
school life, is ever more present.
Yes, it certainly does.
And additionally, just to cut you, we have the 5 to 11-year-olds, and even under 5, the preschoolers, and so on, who are not being vaccinated. The Omicron is no respecter of age. And we are seeing from the news that the young people now are the ones who are being affected by this virus, ending up in the hospitals and so on. What makes our reality any different?
Yes. I think the ministry has
a contingency plan.
Yes, we have contingency plans. We started. We have given out those permission slips to take home for parents just to sign and return. And the schools would now be authorized to ensure that these students are vaccinated. CXC, for example, has already indicated that the examinations are going to begin in May, June. That may change, but that is where they are thinking. And if our young people, especially those in examination classes, have to be out of school, is going to result in learning loss. They're not going to get their SBAs completed satisfactorily and so on. So it's going to affect that category of students who are preparing for examinations. We really can't afford for children to be out of school, right? They need in-class learning, they need the supervision, and as a result, as a way of helping to create a safer environment, they need to be vaccinated. We can't overstress this. They need to be vaccinated. I know in some parts of the world they are making requests for children under 12 to be vaccinated. I'm not sure we are there yet, right? But we really want to encourage our youngsters to get vaccinated. I visited and I can call the name of the school. I visited Keon High School on a Monday morning. I was happy that they were not having a big, large assembly. They had their class assembly. And I took the opportunity to visit every fifth form class. And I shared with them my experience having contracted the coronavirus myself. In about every class, there was maybe like 5 students who had the vaccine, who had already taken the vaccine. And a number of other students, they were happy to ask me questions that showed me that once they got the right answer, the encouraging answer, they were willing to go out and get vaccinated. So we, as Ms. Pistan alluded to, we really have to talk with our youngsters. We have to talk with them, and not just on a one-day basis and leave it, continually. All the schools want to do sports days, and we are saying that you can't go and have a sports day with just a few children in your school vaccinated. And this is something I'm going to fight tooth and nail. I'm saying it publicly, that we're not going to be doing any sports day, track and field, except our students get that vaccination, so we could be in a bubble, so to speak.
Yes, and the buy-in from the parents is extremely important. And I think that is where a lot of the problem has been. I know that Ms. Pistana spoke about, the children and the children having to convince the parents. And I would have thought that it should be the other way around. That the parents should convince their children, because it is their children, and that they are working in the best interest of their children. That, to me, is the more ethical and moral dilemma in which we find ourselves. That the parents are not providing that guidance for their children in terms of taking the vaccine. Well, it's a serious problem.
I think, Mr. Williams, parents have their own concerns. And, you spoke about the moral dilemma. I don't necessarily know if it's that, but it's a case where we are bombarded today with so much information and misinformation that, depending on who the bearer of the information is, sort of determines how much of it we swallow whole and we say yes to, right? So I think, unlike when we took vaccines for mumps and all other things, it was easier then because you went to your local doctor, you trust that doctor's been with your family for years, they spoke to you about it, and you got on board, you took the vaccine. Today, you go on Facebook, somebody has an opinion. You turn on the news, a different person has an opinion. And depending on which news station you watch, whether local or international or regional, we have numerous persons with different opinions. Some of the churches have come on board and they have made a blanket statement about what it is they believe, and they've asked their parishioners to do. Others, maybe they haven't, right? So I just think that our general public is bombarded with information. So it's almost like information overload. And hence why I speak to the fact that we need to have that discussion with our young people. Our young people are intelligent. They are a vibrant force in our community. We know as educators, when children want anything, if they say, "Mommy, I want a phone," they are going to be bombarding their parents day and night to get that phone. That's just how they work. So they are advocates for themselves. So by that same token, we are saying, if we start the dialogue with our young people who will move into adulthood, and I don't think this virus is going anywhere, so they themselves in the next couple of years will have their own children, and they will have to have that discussion, then let's begin to train them to be independent thinkers. It has to be as such that they can be able to rationalize, dialogue with us, read the information, talk to us about their research, and then come to a conclusion based on sound facts. And that is what we have to engage them in.
Yes, and I agree. And sometimes that is what is lacking in the education system. Are we training people to think critically? Are we training them to know what is fact and truth from opinion? Are we training them to be able to sift misinformation, disinformation from actual information? And that is a part of the education system. And some of the young people, what their parents did not receive, they are receiving. But that is what our education system is all about. Training people to be critical thinkers. I know the water is more muddied now. The water is more muddied. But at the very same time, they need steady leadership. I know the parents have their concerns, but sometimes the parents themselves are not really trying to know what the facts are and what the reality actually is. And so therefore, children are guided by their parents.
Yeah, I want to say two things. I would say yes, that our children are taught critical thinking skills. More so, I have evidence of it more so at the primary level. The content that teachers teach help to develop those critical thinking skills. Making inferences, that's a comprehension skill that is being taught. Distinguishing between fact and opinion, those are things, those are the foundation for higher order thinking in terms of critical skills that should be more on display at the secondary level. So our teachers, and even in the private school, because I was at a private school for a different purpose, and the classroom I was in, I was able to see charts displaying those type of skills being taught at that school. Traditionally, historically, parents in the Caribbean, well, definitely in St. Kitts and Nevis, have not had to play a role in when it comes to inoculation, immunization, and so on. This was something that just happened at school. The nurses come to the school and you have to line up and get vaccinated. It's when you get home and you have a little sore arm, your parents might know that you had a vaccination. But as Mrs. Pistana said, with the explosion of knowledge and information today, everybody has become an authority on vaccines. But in my day as a child, I've had several vaccinations without my mother's input or involvement.
They were mandatory.
Right. Okay. When we as adults, when we travel to certain places like Trinidad, we have to present vaccination cards for, is it yellow fever?
Yes, and Guyana.
I was going there for a meeting and I had to do that. When I left here in 2000, went to the United States, I had to carry my vaccination record. When my prospective employers looked at it, they told me that something is missing, and I had to go and get that shot if I wanted to work for their school system. But now, as I said, everybody has become an authority, and it's so much ignorance. People are talking about vaccines.
But I think,
I'm anxious to hear from you.
But Mr. Hodge, if you look back in history, when these vaccines first came on the scene, I think they had a lot of the same hullabaloo. So if you go through the records, you realize that what we're going through now, back in the early 1900s, they also went through the same thing. So it's history repeating itself, for lack of a better term.
It may have been so, Mrs. Pistana. But of course, with the modern means of communication now, with the internet, with the proliferation of cell phones,
right,
and people having 2 and 3, with television, and all of this sort of a thing, it is worse. It is worse. I think you mentioned it before.
Overload, yes.
It's an information overload.
Right, that's right.
There's more to sift. And so on. And that is perhaps part of the problem, and that is how we have to train our young people as well to be media literate. To be media literate. Just because something comes on the internet doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
Just because it's on cable television, it doesn't mean that it is true. Just because it is in a book or a newspaper doesn't mean that it is true. And that is all a part of the critical thinking.
But I can assure you that our teachers are working assiduously to do things like that. I don't think that's just because of Corona. I think that has always been. Mr. Hodge spoke about in the primary section, but in the high school section as well. That's a part of what they do and the training that even themselves as educators would have to go through. And as you take your different courses, your different subjects, there's always a component where you can showcase it, especially as you move towards CXC, because you have to do US-based, some of them would have to do surveys and whatnot. So all of those research skills are brought to the fore. So I don't necessarily think that our children are devoid of it, but like you say, you're impressionable, you're young, you're very impressionable, and even our adults are very impressionable, so never mind our young people. And we just have to keep working with them to get them to where they need to be. Some of us might get there very quickly, and others might take a little while.
I have known had interactions with a number of parents, and their attitude towards the vaccine has been very positive, and their children in turn has gone and taken the vaccine.
Yes.
And that is why I am saying that if a parent has a positive attitude towards vaccination and understands what vaccination is all about and so on, it is more likely that that child in that environment would be more inclined
That's true.
to take the vaccine.
True.
And so therefore, we have to work on the parents. Because the parents are the ones who give the consent for their children to take the vaccine.
Yes.
But that's just vaccination. I know that there is a campaign that the Ministry of Health has had in conjunction
Yes.
with the Ministry of Education in terms of a vaccination drive, and we have to continue.
Yes.
We just have to continue and hope that more people will come on board when they have the information.
Yes.
Yes.
But at the very same time, we know that it is going to impact our school environment.
Right.
Especially now with the Omicron and how transmissible it is. Yesterday, we had 156 cases. New cases. Taking the tally to 600 and something
Yes.
cases in less than a month.
Well, Mr. Williams, I totally agree with you in terms of the numbers are skyrocketing. So for us in education, what are the things that we can't control? Because we can't control parents. What can we control? Let's look at our entry protocols for people coming in within our institutions. Now, we know anybody coming through those gates, and this is at every educational institution we have, they must have their temperature taken. They must sanitize their hands, and they must wear some sort of mask. We are encouraging parents to ensure that your children have more than one, especially in the primary school, because sometimes, for whatever reason, they're running around, the mask drops off, oops, can't find it, don't know where it is. We've gone a step further. We have partnered with a Time For Us Foundation, and they have provided care tubs for all of our institution. In those care tubs, we have additional masks in the event students forget a mask and they reach our gates. We don't have to send them home. We can provide them with the mask, or if they're running around and they misplace the mask, and we can give them a mask. When they go into the classrooms, because I think we do an excellent job at the borders, right? When they're coming through the gate. Where I think things go a little bit awry is when we get into the classroom. Teachers try to ensure that the kids make sure they're sanitized and they keep their physical distance. We have to talk, because we're social creatures, we have to talk to our teenagers in particular about keeping their physical distance, especially during the lunch hour. And we go back to parents again. we encourage you as parents to talk to your students about keeping on their mask. It is easier to wear a medical mask. I can have mine in my pocket.
Yes.
I think you have a different version.
I have a different
You
version.
have the N95, but one
Yes.
of these, it's easier to wear one of these. No, that's a cost for a parent, and I know that is often prohibitive. But if you have one made out of fabric, that's also okay. They're supposed to wear
Well,
it.
with the Omicron, they're not saying that, you know.
But, yes,
the
but you need
the
to-
cloth mask is not the best
Not
mask
the best.
for Omicron.
But if
it's a surgical
financially-
mask.
If
And
financially
if you're
you
going to
cannot
wear one
afford,
cloth mask, it's not enough, wear two.
but if financially you cannot afford, because this is a cost to a parent, and to a parent who's already financially struggling, maybe all they can do is a cloth mask. Any mask is better than no mask.
Yes.
Right? So this is the best, which is the surgical mask. But if you can't afford this, then by all means wear a cloth mask. And we're saying it is supposed to cover your nose, your mouth, and your chin. Wear it that way. Now, for our students who are trendy, some of them wear it on the hand. So it becomes a little pocketbook. Others wear it as a chin cup. We're asking parents to talk to their students. Now, we're in the studio, so we are adequately distanced. People can't see that. So we're able, and it's a wide open space, so we're able to take off our mask. But when they're interacting, especially when they get in close contact with each other, make sure that your mask cover your nose, your mouth, and your chin, so that whatever you have stays with you, and whatever that other person has stays with that person. That is critical. Make sure that you sanitize your hands. We've asked them to walk with a small vial or bottle of hand sanitizer so that they can use it. Sanitize your spaces. Some people say, oh, you think I got corona? No, it's not that I think you have corona, but I most certainly would like to make sure that I don't get corona, I don't get COVID. So sanitize your space. You go to the bathroom facilities, wash your hands properly. When you come back into the classroom, sanitize your hands again. When we talk about persons coming onto our compound, we're asking parents or any person who would like to visit the compound to make an appointment before they come. And the reason for that is we have lots of children in our care. We want to make sure that our teachers, our ancillary staff, and our students are safe. We have to facilitate the people within our institutions first and foremost. So if you're coming onto the property, then you need to let us know ahead of time so that we can make allowances for you, whether at the gate coming in or, to sit with the principal or with a teacher. If it's an emergency and you hit our gate, you can indicate to the personnel at the gate, whether it's the security officer or the teacher who's assigned to the entry protocols, that listen, I have an emergency. I really need to speak to an administrator because, whether it's a medical emergency or whatever other type of emergency, because I need to get access to my child. We really don't want persons just coming because I came to visit a friend, or just come in and they say the child is in school, so I want to come and see the child. We are not encouraging that. We are saying if you're coming to us, you're coming for a particular reason, but let us know in advance so you can be properly treated, meaning we can spend the time having you sanitized at the entry point, and then coming on to the office for the principal to wait on your child to come to you or the teacher to come to you, as opposed to just walking around the facility. That is not encouraged, cannot be done anymore. Okay, so these are some of the things that we're really asking our general public. We go back to instructional time. We want to guard our instructional time. We know that at some point we might have to be out of school, meaning on remote for a protracted period of time. That just might happen. Therefore, whatever face-to-face time we have, we want to make sure that is guarded. Our teachers have the time to teach, our students have the time to learn. So for our stakeholders in the community who partner with us on a regular basis, sometimes they have things that they want to engage our students in. We're asking at the Chief's office that you send that information to us prior, way in advance of any sort of event you want our children to be a part of. And just to give you a heads up, that event cannot be taking place during the regular school time, because we're not going to be participating, and we're holding to that. I'm letting Mr. Hodge down. We're holding to that, because we want to make sure that our children are able to get what it is they need so that we can bridge the gap that we see is increasing over time. So we want to make sure of that. So if you have something that you want our children to be a part of, if it's some sort of essay competition, any other competition, that tends to be the drive, any sort of other competitions, send it into our office weeks in advance. If you can give us a month or two in advance, that's excellent, so we can go through it, we can speak to the principal, and we can make a decision as to whether or not we would approve it. We recommend that our stakeholders get a little bit creative. Again, you tend to send things like essay competitions, and then we have other quizzes and whatnot. And that targets a very small sector of our school population. The other things that students can do based on their talents, whether they love the media, so taking certain videos of whatever topic base you might have. For example, Black History Month, they can create videos. For those of our kids who are in visual arts, they can actually create, whether it's a sculpture or an outfit or things. So let's get creative so we can target all of our students as opposed to a small sector of our students. Right, and whatever you do, let me reiterate this, way in advance. Yes. Way in advance.
Okay, we are going to go to the phone lines. We'll continue our discussion, but the numbers to call are 466-2666. That is 466-2666. The cell numbers are 662-8674, 662-8674, 767-4765, 767-4765, and the overseas number is 1-239-645-4500. We welcome your calls.
Yeah. I would quickly like to say something because I know most persons are waiting to hear this information. Schools are due to begin on Monday, 10th January. However, given the prevailing situation with the number of positive cases trending upwards, the Ministry of Education will be given guidance by the Ministry of Health to determine when schools will reopen. The Ministry of Health has already indicated that keeping schools closed will be the last resort. Keeping schools closed will be the last resort. It is anticipated that the Ministry of Health will, in the next 48 to 72 hours, tell the Ministry of Education if we should proceed to open school.
Yes, because even though we are saying that the in-person learning has many more advantages, benefits to the virtual learning, which still has to be driven. The reopening of schools has to be informed by the scientific data.
Absolutely.
And this thing is spreading like wildfire. Working for you, good afternoon.
At the table, Mr. Hodge and the lady there.
Good afternoon.
Fragmentation of the New Year greetings to you all.
New Year greetings to you as well.
Thank you very much, man. Yeah, I'm here enjoying the program as usual. Now, I have a question, and it's kind of confusing to me. We've been focusing earlier when this COVID-19 came here first. We were focusing on having the vaccination and, as usual, using non-pharmaceutical material or whatever it is. Now, my question is this. If everybody in a bubble, everyone has been vaccinated and everyone have on the mask, can one contage whatever is in the air from the other one, even though everybody is being vaccinated and everyone has on the mask? That's question number one. Well, what if now one person in there not vaccinated and the other one vaccinated and none of them have on mask? What can happen there? Can one contage the other one with it? Or if both of them never have been vaccinated and none of them got on a mask under the chin, it doesn't matter what bubble they say you're in. I guess you have to be vaccinated to be in that bubble. Now, what is the use of telling one stay 6 feet apart from each other? If you know well then that the person has on his mask and he been vaccinated, but still stay 6 feet apart. So that is the part that is confusing me.
Okay.
So I will listen up the ear because
Yes.
I want to hear everything good and somebody else might want to
we thank you very much, but I think that those questions would be better served at the COVID-19 briefing, as none of us on this panel is a medical professional, and the medical professionals are better poised to answer those questions that you asked.
Tune in this afternoon at 5.
This afternoon we do not have a briefing. The briefing will be held sometime later this week.
Oh,
But we do not have a briefing today.
okay.
Right, and so we continue the discussion and the reopening of schools and how it will be driven by the scientific data and so on. But I am concerned, especially for our primary schools and even our secondary schools, because their vaccination rate is not where it should be.
Right.
The primary schools, they cannot be vaccinated, and so therefore they're even at greater risk. And we know with the spread of this thing, once it's in a house, it's in a house. Once a child has it, the parents getting it. The entire household will have it.
We have a principals meeting scheduled for tomorrow because we have to provide additional guidance to principals and encouragement to insist, to ask that they really enforce the wearing of masks by the students. The Honorable Minister of Education himself said he had visited schools just towards the end of the term there, and he gave me the name of the schools where in classes children were not really wearing the mask appropriately. They have it on under the chin and so on. And so we have to appeal to our principals and our teachers. They themselves have to set the example by wearing their mask and the insisting that the teachers, the children do it. We have to keep sanitizing. Schools have fancy dispensers of the ones, automatic ones. Right.
They
have some schools have gone to the length to get those devices that take your temperature, other than the temperature guns. You know, so we are asking them to insist on these, and where possible, keep the distance. We are not encouraging whole school assembly. We were about to say have a whole school assembly on the opening day when visitors from the Ministry of Education would come in to speak to students, but we had to abandon that plan. So we are saying let classes have their individual class assembly, principals and deputy principals, senior teachers can move around to greet students and so on, but we have to keep those distance. I'm really concerned about the two secondary schools in Bastille continuing on the shift system. But that's how it has to be. Because, and I'm making a special appeal to parents and maybe even the police and the wider community, too many of the students from both Washington Archibald High and Bastille High School are around town for part of the day because they have already done their shift. Okay, your shift is from 8 until 12, but they're not going home. They're not going home to do work online or to do homework physically.
Not going home is the other shift.
They're hanging out. They're hanging out downtown by
Burger King.
Mm-hmm. I've stopped and spoken to students, and they were very respectful. I introduced myself. I said who I am, and spoke to them, and so on. But we don't want that for our students. We want our students to be in school full time. So we are begging the parents who have children going to those school, really get the children vaccinated so we can make an effort. The percentage is really low, and we are putting, we don't want to put any pressure on principals to get this information, but the principals are trying their best, to encourage students to get vaccinated. One principal shared something with me, a response from a parent, and I'm too ashamed to say it here. I'm really too ashamed to say it here. And if I say so, you believe me, because I just say whatever I need to say, wherever I need to say, right? And I know who the principal, who the parent is, because I got the name from the principal, but I leave that. But yes, we really got to get our
if children are sick, Mrs. Pistana, they should stay at home.
Yes.
Yes,
That's,
I'm glad you said that.
and I know for a fact that sometimes children are sick, but of course the parent still would send them to school.
Yeah.
Because by having them at home, it raises other challenges.
Yeah.
Who is going to stay at home with them, and who is going to look after them, and all of that sort of a thing. So they prefer to send a sick child to school because that in some way solves those other issues that will come with them remaining at home.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't solve it. It's going to create more problems, because then a sick child comes to school, and then that child is infectious, infects others.
Yeah, yes, the Office of the Chief Education Officer have had to deal with that. They themselves, officers from the CEO's office, had to call parents to say, look, the principal is asking that you come, because the principal had tried, and parents refused to go to collect their children. And so we had to get involved to say, you really need to come to get the child, because the child is sick. So that I'm very happy you said that. Now, each school was asked to do a sick bay.
Right.
I noticed recently that the teacher in Keon High School is working with the Past Students Association to upscale their sick bay, asking for donations that they need of equipment they need for the sick bay. So that's very highly commendable. You know, I think there's a call.
Yeah, working for you. Good afternoon. Hello. Working for you.
Hello.
Yes, we are hearing you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year to the panel there.
Happy New Year to you as well.
I find, you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you.
Okay. I find that you all dropped the ball, to me. They dropped the ball. From the time a child born,
We seem to have lost that
no,
call.
they ain't gone yet, but I don't understand.
Oh, you're trying to put your thoughts together. Okay.
Oh, okay. To me, you all dropped the ball. Because from the time a child born, who take care of the child health all the way till you reach up? You call it like the health department, the government health department.
Well, yes, in a certain sense, but
But when the child, you have a vaccine, you know, when you vaccine the child all the way till you reach maturity. If he's sick, he go hospital, it's free medication, free health care for the child. How come now a vaccine and the child don't get a vaccine? He have to get permission from parents and all these kind of things. They drop the ball. Thanks for listening.
I'm wondering who dropped the ball. I'm trying to figure out who dropped the ball. I'm thinking that the caller is implying that this thing should be mandated, that vaccination should be mandatory. If that's his case,
that is the logical inference.
yeah. If that's his inference, I am with him 100%, because I am all for mandating this thing. I am not the government, the prime minister, the cabinet, but I'm telling you, I would support mandating this thing anytime.
Yes,
For
but
teachers and students.
he said something though, that the health of a child is the responsibility of the government or the authorities, which I disagree with. The health of any child is the responsibility of the parent.
I agree.
The parent must be responsible for the health of that child. the government is only there to facilitate, the institutions and what's not, through which the health of that child can flourish.
Yes.
Whether the proper health care, hospitals, health centers, and all of that sort of a thing. But the parent must get involved in the proper health of that child. The mandating of vaccines, of course, is a very contentious issue at this time, and that is why the parents must get involved in the health of their children and send their children, in my view, to be vaccinated.
Yes.
We cannot take the responsibility of the parents and put it on the government.
Right.
The government should only, well, what can I say? It's Mr. Hodge.
The government, as I said, the government facilitates the opportunity for parents to ensure that their children receive health treatment as they grow. But my thinking is that, bottom line, parents are responsible for the health of their children. In terms of education, we have focused on the school setting today. But of course, education has other areas. For example, our school meals department. The director of school meals, the coordinator, has asked me to inform workers, to remind workers that they meet tomorrow, they should report to work tomorrow. Just in case school is going to start on Monday, they'll be already beginning their preparation. Our school buses are put on alert in case school is going to start. But we wait for health to advise, and when this information comes to hand, our Minister of Education will make an address to say exactly when school is open and how we're moving forward. So I just wanted to put that out there. Persons who work at school meals, you have to report tomorrow. Other areas, units, departments in education, we continue to report as usual, except there are national restrictions that the country may impose.
Yes, we have another call. Working for you, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you.
I went to school in the 60s, and there was a time when injection was given to every child. I don't see it go and see it. My day, that my father just go to know that every child going to school must get injection. Is being confident when next week or 2 weeks out, you would have to get injection.
Caller, okay, caller, you are not very clear, but from the little that I gleaned is that you are in support of the children getting the vaccine, and that when you were young, you had your vaccines without any sort of a question.
Yes.
I think that is what the
Yes.
caller actually
Yeah, thank you.
was saying.
Absolutely. That's what I got as well. Yeah. Yeah, there's a certain generation of persons who thought that this is just one of those things that we do and move on. But at the same time, I guess we have a certain section of that age group who, well, they might deem to be more enlightened educationally and so on, and so they would want to question, some persons say they don't know what is made up, what the vaccine is made up of. Others are saying that the vaccine was made up, it came into existence so quickly. But when we were getting those vaccines for those other things, mumps, measles, chickenpox, we didn't have a clue as to how long those things were taking. That information was not out there.
That is true. The fact of the matter is that we use a lot of things and we don't even read what is on the box.
Right.
In terms of the ingredients, what is in it. And that is just a plain fact. You know, so this is just another thing in terms of not knowing what is in it. I don't know all the ingredients in Tylenol or paracetamol, but yet I take them, you know, and because they do work. Mrs. Pistana, I know you mentioned in terms of the proactive measures to be taken in schools to mitigate against the transmission of the virus and its spread. Who will police this? Who is going to police it in the schools? Because left up to the children, they will do their own policing. And you know, of course, what will happen. So who will police these proactive measures?
Well, every school has a management team. The management team consists of the principal, deputy principal, guidance counselor, and a teacher or two, depending on how large the institution is as it pertains to numbers. Those persons are in charge of assisting the principal in ensuring that whatever mandates we have, they're enforced. This is one such mandate. We're asking teachers to do their due diligence in classrooms, which means if I step into a classroom and you don't have your mask on, I am going to say to you, you need to put on your mask. But I also have to model it. So even for myself as an educator, when I step onto any compound, I must have my mask on. I must go through the protocols. And that is something that we're asking all the adults within our institution to ensure that they model the mandates as it pertains to our COVID-19 protocols. That's essential. So the security officers are going to do their job at the gate. You can't gate entry unless you have your mask on. The teachers will do their job in the classrooms because they're going to ensure and encourage their students to wear their mask when they're indoors in particular. If they're outdoors and they're, physically distanced and they want to take it off, or even if they, feel a little bit stuffy and they want to step outside to take it off, we will say to them that's something that you can allow. We know for our children in the infant department, those in kindergarten to grade 2 and even as early as preschool, that's a huge challenge. But like in other countries where they have to practice, we can't expect them to show up in grade 3 and suddenly know how to put a mask on and how to wear it properly. So we're going to practice, but we're going to practice empathy as adults when we realize that they just might not get it right away. But we will still encourage them to do what is right and what is in keeping with the COVID-19 protocols.
Okay. Now, Mr. Hodge, the channels for communication and information, of course, in a situation like which we find ourselves, with, the safety and all of that of our children and their learning, it is important that the communication and information lines are very clear and remain open so that people can know where to go for information, for their guidance in this very, at this time. So what are they?
Yes, well, definitely parents have lines of communication with their principals, their teachers and principals. They have a number of existing chats. I think every primary school class has a chat with parents, and so that is one way of communicating with that audience. In terms of schools, principals communicating with the ministry, the Department of Education and the ministry, those lines are clearly defined. We have principals chat where we can just send alert messages. We also have formal communication that would be sent out via emails. Each school has an education officer who is assigned, and so that's usually the principal's first stop, your education officer, who would then take it up, with the deputy chief, the chief education officer, or even the senior education officer as it pertains. So those lines of communication are clear. What we ask the general public is to be aware of the medium or the media by which the messages come. Because just recently, somebody from one of the social media called me to find out if we sent out something to say that school is closed for the rest of the term. Right there, I picked up something. Which term are they talking about?
Yeah.
They didn't say the school year, they said the term. But school was already closed for one term and it hadn't opened yet for another. You see? We use the education media unit as our channel for sending out information. And we have logos and all those things, so you know. Official, it's authentic. Then we may have addresses, in particular by the Minister of Education, so you know that this is really coming from the horse's mouth, you know. So,
especially in this age, to talk about what we were talking about of misinformation and disinformation, there are creators of information that is not factual and correct. Like people putting things out there on social media that school is suspended until so and so and so. Well, the first thing that I will ask is, where did you get that? Rather than running with it.
right.
You see? And that is what I mean. We always have to go to the official source for information. And so that is important. But we are out of time. And is there anything else that you would like to mention before we leave? Important for our teachers and our students to know with respect to the upcoming reopening of schools. I know we've touched on the logistical arrangements for term 2, the COVID-19 protocols. We've looked at the proactive measures, the educational and social impact on students and teachers, and the channels for communication and information. Is there anything else?
The social impact, especially in the Basti area here with children out of school, that has come to the fore in our conversation as a ministry as well as with the Ministry of Health. You know, children are being abused because at the time when they should be in school, their shift is over, so they are on their way home or they are not going home, and so they get into situations where they are being abused, especially our female students are being abused by male. And all of these things are happening even in some households because children are home on a half day. They're only being in school for half day, and then there's a male who lives in that same household or a visitor, and we're getting reports of our female students being abused, sexually abused.
And that is terrible.
This is worrying to us. And so we are really appealing again to our parents, get those children vaccinated, get the numbers, let me get the numbers up to a certain level that we can say, okay, we can bring in all of these children in the space allocated for their classes. Because 34 children at Washington Archibald High School is a lot for the square footage of those rooms. And in Basti High, 30 is a lot for the square footage of those classrooms. But our desire, the heart and desire of all of us humans in the Ministry of Education is to have our children in school 8 to 4.
I know that a lot of students gather at Burger King. I don't know what is the attraction there. Maybe it's the burger. But they gather. A lot of them gather there. It seems to be a gathering place. And I often wonder what is the attraction, because sometimes they are not inside. They just gather. They're just on the corner there. It's a spot that they come and they gather. Mrs. Pistana, anything before we go?
I just want to say a huge thank you to our educators in particular. You have done an awesome job over these past 2 years. We talk about frontline workers, and our teachers, our ancillary staff, they are frontline workers.
Absolutely.
And they've worked tirelessly with us. And, regardless of the demands, they have risen to it and they have met it. So I want to say a huge thank you on behalf of the chief and myself for all of the hard work and dedication that you continue to exhibit despite the extenuating circumstances that we find ourselves in. So thank you so much. To our parents and other stakeholders, we continue to stress the need for you to work in tandem with us. It takes a village to raise a child. That is the old adage. We can't do it alone, and we will never say that we can do it alone. So we require your help, continuous support in ensuring that your your children do what it is they are required to do. As we spoke about them loitering at Burger King, if it is you don't have a place to send your child, this is a discussion you can have with the ministry. Let us begin to work together to see what we can possibly do. We've sat down as it is and we've had certain discussions, but parents have to be a part of this, and they have to begin to open up and talk to us at the school level to tell us, this is what's happening to me. I need your assistance in this way. And we can put our heads together to come to a real solution for this problem that I think, in a way, it's disruptive for the business owners within town. When you look at some of the video footage that comes out from the fights, it's disrespectful. It brings the schools that they go to in disrepute. I mean, it just is a bad thing all around. And we really need to get a handle on our children. We need to ensure that our children are truly the models that we want within this particular society. So for them, loitering is inculcating the wrong values in them, and we want to make sure that that is stamped out and that we inculcate in them the right values so that they can become productive citizens. So I want to say a huge thank you for coming on board, because I expect that you will continue to be on board, and for those of you who aren't, that you will try to be on board so that we can move our federation forward and upward. So, as it stands now, I want to thank Liz Roy Williams for having us on. And for allowing us to really speak candidly to our stakeholders, and just to let them know where we're at as a ministry. We don't have all the answers. We will never say that we do. We require your input, and we crave your indulgence, because this is a learning experience. As the science unfolds, then the information will change, and sometimes that may seem a little bit difficult for people to digest, but it's science, and science is not fixed. So again, thank you, and I do wish you all the best for 2022.
Before we go, what's the vaccination rate of the school administration and teachers? Is it satisfactory?
It is satisfactory. It is encouraging. For the two schools in Bastille, it is encouraging.
Okay.
And so we are continuing to push that, and we are going to reach out to the other high schools, all the other schools, to get their data. Yes, and we are also going to capture that data from other units and departments within the Ministry of Education.
Okay, good.
Because we want a more global picture.
Of course, because you can't be asking the children to get vaccinated and the teachers are not. Doesn't send the correct message either.
I mean,
right.
I can say off the top in education, all the top officials and leaders and managers and so on, we are all vaccinated. Some of us are vaccinated and boosted. Yeah.
Okay.
I really would like to thank Ms. Pistana and the Chief Education Officer. They have really done a tremendous job in helping to manage this COVID pandemic in schools. They have worked very well with Mr. Markman from the Ministry of Health. He has been a lifesaver for the Ministry of Education. He did send me the statistics in terms of the number of children who are affected in this current wave. I'm not going to say the number, but it's in the single digit, which is encouraging. And so we are hoping that we can open school safely. But I would really like to thank Mr. Pistana and Mr. Morris for leading the charge here, as well as persons from Central Office.
That is good. Well, I thank both of you, Mrs. Lisa Pistana, the Deputy Chief Education Officer, and you, Mr. Hodge, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, for coming and sharing on something so important to all of us, the education of our nation. Really, the education of our young people, especially at this very challenging time of the COVID-19 pandemic. We pray for the day when it will be over. However, as it stands right now, it is like a movie without any end. And the parts are moving. There are many moving parts in this movie, and we're trying to understand it as we go along and to do the best that we can. as we go along, especially for our young people and their education, which is so important. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of our callers to today's program. Those of you who listened to today's program, especially our young people and our parents. And because it is so important that you do what is best for your child, especially with respect to their education. That is extremely important. Today is our first program for the 2022, and I want to wish all of our listeners to this program and all of you a brighter and a more prosperous 2022. Thank you very much. I am Les Roy Williams.
There are it, folks, another edition of Working for You here on FM 98.9. Up next, we got Conscious Business.